On October 31st in 1984, Mike Carlton battled an unknown entity in the Nowhere House to save his younger brother from drowning in a filthy bathtub. For years, few believed Mike's stories and passed it off as a scared kid's overactive imagination. But Mike grew up knowing that what he saw was real and that there was an evil in this world, an unfathomable evil that came this close to ending his life. Here is Mike's story about the terrifying night in the Nowhere House. It started as just another Halloween back in '84, when the ghouls and ghosts were just people in costumes. Little did I know that by that evening I would be battling evil to save my little brother from being drowned in a filthy bathtub. And it all happened in an empty house in town known as the Nowhere House. Back in the 80s, see, our family moved to my aunt's place out on the edge of nowhere in Fairhope, Alabama. See, my mom had left my dad, or should I say, escaped. My little brother, Cricket, was only 6, so he was doing okay. I was 13 and furious that mom had taken me away from my friends, my crush, everything that made sense to me. Mom was having a hard time. She cried a lot and often stayed in bed all day. This meant that I was often stuck looking after Cricket. Not a good look when I was trying to impress the other kids in town. But despite this, I still managed to make friends with the notorious McGregor twins, Richie and Ralph. They played rough, they talked mean, and I overheard an old woman in the butchers refer to them as bad to the bone. Naturally, I wanted to be just like them. On Halloween, Mom was having one of her dark days, so she told me I had to take Cricket out trick-or-treating. Not good, as I had arranged to meet the twins to drink beer and smoke cigarettes. I tried arguing with Mom, but she got upset. She started crying. I didn't want to see her like this, so it looked like the kid was coming with me. I was furious. I remember wishing that Cricket had never even been born. A thought, of course, I didn't mean. The twins were not impressed when they saw me show up with my hyper, sugar-rushing brother. They gave me dirty looks and were convinced he was going to snitch on us. I tried to play it cool, but I was mortified. And this was just made worse by Cricket's behavior. He pulled stupid faces, threw candy wrappers at us. I told them I would lose the kid later on and also convinced him that he wouldn't snitch. I threatened to stomp on all his Transformers if he uttered a word about it to Mom. So, we agreed to meet later at our usual spot, a hollow at the end of the Wood Acres Road, right up close to the woods. From there, we would have our own real Halloween in the infamous Nowhere House. I left the twins and I shuffled along the sidewalk, cursing under my breath as I dodged the hordes of little ghosts and witches screeching about the road. There was something in the air that night. The way the lights shimmered from the mouths of toothy pumpkins or the stillness in the autumn air. Something was making me feel watchful, jumpy, and just itchy in my own skin. I just had this very dark feeling growing in my belly, and my eyes kept wandering to the old road where I could feel Nowhere House staring back at me under the heavy moon. Many folks in town said that there were ghosts in those walls. Everyone said strange shit went down in that old house. I was afraid of that place. It's like it's crouching there in the dark hollow waiting for me. I remember thinking, if only I'd had that sense to listen to myself instead of ignoring my gut, just to impress those kids. I guess I was a fool back then. Once Cricket had his fill of candy, I walked him back home, in no hurry to meet up with the twins and venture into the Nowhere House. Come on, I want to come with you, Mikey, Cricket begged me, pulling on my jacket sleeve. When I refused, he said he would snitch on me to Mom. I reminded him of the fate of his Transformers if he did. And then he quickly fell silent. I slipped away to meet the twins before my mother dragged me in. The warm beer we sipped in our secret spot had made us all brave, and as I said, we were 13. We dawdled, talking tough as the night got ever darker. Porch lights winking out light ahead of us one by one like they were giving up hope. Eventually, Richard said it was time to go, and God help me, I followed, even though I was dying to go home. The path up to the house was overgrown, and as we walked up in the light of Ralph's torch, the brambles clawed at our clothes like they wanted to keep us. As we stumbled up that overgrown yard, I felt my knees tremble as the house loomed up, craggy and spread out like a monster climbing out of the earth. And then the twins even also got kinda quiet as we moved in the darkness. The stairs to the door were all wonky and tilted this way and that, and we all stopped dead at the same time. "Well, what are you waiting for? Are you too chicken?" Richie spoke into the dead air, his voice off pitch as he directed his clucking sounds at me. It was suddenly too quiet. The insects and night birds silent. The huge house spanned 2 floors with old busted balconies and tooth-like turrets. I shone my light up to the old front door that hung slightly open like a slack mouth. I started feeling sick to my stomach and knew that the twins felt that too. I desperately wanted to suggest that we go back, but I just didn't want to be called a chicken again. God, I wish I didn't care what they thought. Richie stepped out first, and we followed, elbowing each other and cursing loudly in the hushed dark. The old wood moaned and complained under us as we moved inside, the light from our flashlights dancing over the looming cobwebs and decaying walls. Our feet moving across the dirty old floor sounded like something huge cracking its knuckles. The walls of the hallways looked flayed, the once grand wallpaper hanging down in patches and the slats underneath showing like ribs. In the center of the hallway, a staircase reared up and made its tattered way onto the upper landing. "Y'all ghosts want a party?" Ralph yelled. The air was thick inside, making Richie's voice sound muffled. "Yo, ghosts wanna smoke?" Richie laughed, but the house felt like it was holding its breath, waiting. The stairs leading up to the landing seemed endless. I could hear the twins breathing hard, and I knew they felt it too, that we weren't alone in that big old house. We clustered close together in the feeble light of our flashlights while the nowhere house pressed in around us. Just then, something pulled hard on my jacket and a cackle tore the air. I let out a high-pitched shriek, and Ralph and Richie did too. We were suddenly all over each other in a bunch of tangled arms and legs like we were drowning. The curse words flew thick and heavy. I swung my light around me, honestly ready to die, my heart beating on my tongue. The light revealed a chocolate-smeared face with a grin full of gappy teeth that I had the sudden urge to punch out like a reverse tooth fairy. Damn it. Cricket had followed us. Ralph and Richie were furious. They stood over my brother, peering down at his innocent but smug grin, looking like they wanted to do him a serious injury. I stepped in front of them. "Hey, come on, cool it, guys. He's just a kid." But then a bang sounded, so loud it made the whole world spin. My body started running before my brain caught up, and we fought to get outside like we were on fire. We caught our breath, panicking. Just as we started to slow down our terrified breaths, I noticed something that made the earth tilt under my feet. Cricket was gone. I swung my flashlight backward and forward. I spun in a circle. I shouted his name until my throat burned. The twins joined in, but around us there were only scraggly trees and that awful house looming over us. "I ain't going back in there." Richie's face was white and his hand on the flashlight shook. "Me neither, he ain't my brother," said Ralph. I was split in two. Part of me wanted to run so badly that my legs were twitching under me. The other part knew that my little brother was inside that doomed house and it was up to me to get him out. I looked back at the house and I tried to force myself to move toward it, but my muscles and my bones were locked up in terror. And then I heard Cricket cry from inside the house, a pained, endless scream. So I forced my quivering legs up those steps and into that house. I called for Cricket, my voice ragged with fear. Inside that cursed place, I stood on the old wooden stairs and I listened. I heard muffled crying from the blackness of upstairs, terrifying whimpers that made the small hairs on my skin rise. And that hallway was narrow, squeezing me in its stained sides. As I crept deeper inside the house, I heard a whimper again and the sound of something flapping around in the water. Someone was saying the Lord's Prayer over and over like some kind of madman, and then I felt so dizzy when I realized it was coming from me. I walked up step by terrifying step towards the sound, and then the crying sounded again. From a closed door at the end of the hallway, so dark it looked like the end of the whole world. Next to me, the stairway was an open gullet. As I reached the door and I slowly opened that rusted handle, as I swung open the rusty hinges, a dark figure moved towards me. The blood felt like it left my body and my numbed fingers lost hold of the light. In a panic, I dropped to my knees, brailing the dirty floor for the flashlight like my life depended on it. My breath burning in my throat as I jumped up to face myself, my face a white O in a huge, old, molted mirror. As my heart settled back in my ribs, I realized that I was in a bathroom. Below the mirror was an old tub with legs of a lion, ball and claw, I later learned. The white porcelain had rusted down the sides and now shone like old blood. I heard another whimper and the sound of a splash. I slowly stepped toward that tub, my breathing loud and desperate. The tub was half filled with sludgy black water and the moon shone a sick silver through that busted old window. My heart beating in my throat, I leaned over to look, my flashlight dim against the inside of the bathtub. I swear to God, I saw a child's face. Black holes for eyes and a mouth wide open, gasping for air under that filthy fluid. Cricket. I panicked and I stuck my hands in the water to grab the kid, but I only clawed up fistfuls of leaves and dirt. I thought this was it, that my brother was going to drown and I couldn't reach him. It was then I felt someone pressed close up behind me. It was so close I could feel ragged breaths puff up the hairs on the back of my neck. And the smell was so wretched it made those trick-or-treat candy bars rise sour from deep in my throat. And then a slow moan moved the vile air against the shell of my ear. In that moment, it felt like the darkness was trying to seep into me. I needed to rescue Cricket, but something was stopping me. A whisper in my head was telling me, get him, hurt him, kill him. I wanted to rip that voice out of my head. I don't know how long I stood like that, frozen to stone with terror, while my eyes darted over that sludgy water, trying to seek out Cricket, but also afraid that I would give in to the voice and I would harm my brother. The water bubbled and it gurgled beneath me, and then I felt it, a bony hand press on my shoulder. My eyes moved up to that great black molded mirror, even though every part of me screamed to shut my eyelids tight. A form in shadow shades deeper than black was behind me, with the drapes of a full skirt billowing out around it like black soot. Its face was pressed downwards, toward my ear, like it wished to tell me a secret. I could still hear Ralph and Richie rustling and hollering from outside, but my body was stone. And then something moved in that filthy tub water, something struggling and splashing. It was like a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. Two little hands grabbed at the sides of that rusty tub with blackened fingers, and a small head rose from the shadows into that light. That thing that I saw was not Cricket, not with those black holes for eyes and that terrible gash of a mouth. Then the figure moved behind me, pressing me down towards the tub. Hands pulled at my hair, but I fought back. Pure terror is what broke my body free, and I was speeding down that black landing and half running, half tumbling down the stairs. When I busted through that front door, I was screaming at impossible octaves. As my body finally came to a stop, I was standing right in front of the twins. Cricket was standing between them, holding a stick like it was a sword. I grabbed Cricket and I shouted for the twins to run. We stumbled into the dark and out of that cursed yard. The only sound was our panicked breathing as our flashlights jumped in the thick bushes and trees. I was dragging Cricket for all I was worth. I don't think his little legs touched the ground once. When we finally reached our street, I collapsed. Tears streamed from my eyes and my body trembled uncontrollably. The voices had stopped, but I feared they would come back, so I screamed at Cricket to get away from me. Cricket, of course, ignored my pleas as he poked me with his stick and asked me why I was acting weird. If he only knew. At the time, news of Mike Carlton's ordeal spread around the town, but by most was disregarded as a childish Halloween prank. During the subsequent years, after Mike's terrifying incident, several witnesses also reported strange occurrences at the Nowhere House. Investigators, searching through Fairhope County records, found an old listing that recorded the deaths of Bethany Miller and her son, Jake, in 1917. Reports show that when her husband was away in the war, she contacted the police, claiming that there was an evil entity in her house. one that was trying to make her harm her child. On the morning that she received the news of her husband's death, she drowned her child in the bathtub. The sheriff and deputy found her in the upstairs hallway, inconsolable and clutching her husband's rifle. She told them that the evil in her house made her do it, and then she shot the sheriff and herself. At the time, it was presumed that Bethany Miller was ill of the mind, and the loss of her husband led to a grief and sorrow that she couldn't bear. In 1997, the Fairhope Town Council voted unanimously that the house be destroyed, claiming the Nowhere House was not only an eyesore, but a danger to the younger residents of Fairhope. To this day, witnesses claim to have heard a child crying in the tangled plot where the old house once stood. Fairhope police have on record one Callum McGregor, who filed a police report in 2021 about a child most likely lost in the woods. The man who was visiting family in Fairhope heard those cries of a child. He tried to locate the ailing youngster, but he could not find him. Records also show that McGregor led police right back to the empty plot where the Nowhere House once stood. For more scary horror stories, please subscribe.